It starts with a text left on read. Then, muted notifications. Finally, a complete digital and physical disappearance. No argument, no dramatic closing fight, just absolute, echoing silence. In psychology, it's called social banishment or radical cutting off, and it is becoming a silent epidemic in modern relationships. But what drives a human being to completely erase people they once loved from their life? Is it a toxic survival mechanism, an act of emotional maturity, or a quiet cry for help? Today, we are peering behind the wall. Welcome back to Sigma Intelligence. If you've ever been abruptly ghosted by a close friend, cut off by a family member, or if you're the one who constantly feels the urge to pack your bags and start over where nobody knows your name, this video is for you. When someone severs all ties, the people left behind usually assume it was an act of cruelty or cold indifference. But psychological research reveals that the internal world of the person who cuts everyone off is rarely cold. In fact, it's usually white-hot with overwhelm. Today, we are breaking down the hidden psychological blueprints of the people who walk away, the deep-seated fears that trigger the freeze response, and what this radical self-defense mechanism says about the human mind. The avoidant preemptive strike. To understand why someone cuts people off, we have to look at how their brain evaluates safety. Most people who radically sever ties operate from a place of profound hyper-vigilance, a state of constant, exhausting alertness, where the brain treats emotional vulnerability as an immediate threat. In developmental psychology, this heavily maps onto what is known as an avoidant attachment style. When a person grows up in an environment where their emotional needs were neglected, mocked, or met with volatile unpredictability, they internalize a core belief: I can only rely on myself. Other people are inherently unsafe. As adults, when a relationship or friendship becomes deep and emotionally complex, it triggers a massive internal alarm bell. For an avoidant individual, closeness feels like a trap. It feels like losing autonomy. So, before the other person can reject them, disappoint them, or hurt them, they activate the ultimate defense mechanism. They strike first by disappearing. It is a psychological preemptive strike. By cutting you off before things get messy, they regain total control over their narrative. Another powerful psychological mechanism at play here is a cognitive distortion known as splitting, or black and white thinking. For many people who routinely wipe their social slates clean, relationships are binary. There is no middle ground between perfect safety and total betrayal. The moment a friend forgets a birthday, expresses a conflicting political view, or unintentionally crosses a boundary, the cutting off mechanism is triggered. The person doesn't see a flawed human being who made a mistake. They see an enemy who is entirely unsafe. This creates a dangerous psychological loop. Phase 1. Idealization. They find a new friend or partner and think, finally, someone who completely understands me. Phase 2. The friction. An inevitable human conflict or boundary slip happens. Phase 3. Devaluation. The splitting mechanism activates. The person reevaluates every past interaction through a lens of suspicion. Phase 4. The execution. They cut the person off entirely, experiencing an immediate, intoxicating rush of relief. This rush of relief is a dangerous psychological trap, because the act of walking away instantly lowers their cortisol and anxiety levels. Their brain registers cutting people off as a highly successful coping strategy. This reinforces the behavior, making it their go-to solution whenever life gets heavy. Up until now, we've looked at cutting people off through the lens of trauma and personality structure. But there is another major, often overlooked psychological driver: pure cognitive and sensory exhaustion. When an individual experiences a prolonged period of high stress, whether from a job, financial pressure, or mental health struggles, their brain runs out of processing power. They enter a state of deep psychological burnout. When you are in deep burnout, replying to a simple text message feels like lifting a vehicle. Maintaining a friendship feels like running a marathon with no shoes. In these scenarios, cutting people off isn't an act of anger or fear. It is a desperate, involuntary shutdown mechanism. The brain goes into eco mode to preserve what little energy it has left, cutting off non-essential social ties just to keep the physical body functioning. Through negative reinforcement, the sudden drop in anxiety they feel after disappearing acts as a reward. They learn that peace is found in isolation, making the habit of vanishing harder and harder to break. Stop for a second. Think of someone who completely vanished from your life, or think about the last time you felt the overwhelming urge to block everyone and disappear. Did that urge come from a place of cold, calculated hatred? Or did it come from a place of deep, exhausted panic? Recognizing this distinction is the exact key to understanding the difference between setting a healthy boundary and executing a fear-driven escape. We often focus on the pain of the person who was cut off, and that pain is incredibly real. Psychological studies show that being ostracized activates the exact same pathways in the human brain as physical pain. To the brain, silent rejection feels like a physical blow. But what about the person who walked away? What happens after the initial rush of relief fades? Except in rare cases of severe psychopathy, the person who cuts everyone off eventually pays a heavy psychological tax. Over time, the relief decays into profound, chronic isolation. Because they never stayed in a relationship long enough to navigate conflict, they never build the emotional muscle required to trust or be trusted. They become trapped in a self-fulfilling prophecy. They cut people off to avoid being abandoned, but by doing so, they abandon themselves to total loneliness. They watch from a digital distance as their old friend groups celebrate milestones, move forward, and grow closer, while they remain stagnant behind the fortress they built. They are safe from conflict, yes, but they are also completely locked out of human connection. There is a vital difference between cutting off toxic, abusive individuals to save your own life, and using cutting off as a blanket coping mechanism for normal human friction. Healthy boundary setting is communicated and targeted. Maladaptive cutting off is silent, sudden, and systemic. The human mind will build any fortress it needs to survive a perceived threat. But a fortress built too thick quickly becomes a prison. Conflict is a painful, messy, unavoidable part of the human experience, but it is also the exact place where deep, unshakable trust is forged. If you've been cut off, realize it was likely a reflection of their internal war, not your unworthiness. And if you are the one behind the wall, remember that it's okay to let the drawbridge down, even just an inch. If this psychological deep dive gave you something to analyze, hit that like button and subscribe to Sigma Intelligence. Share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever cut someone off, or been on the receiving end of the silence? Let's talk about it. See you in the next video.